Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning into the Liberty Report. With us today, we have Daniel McAdams, our co host. Daniel, welcome to the program.
Good morning, Dr. Paul. How are you this morning?
Very good, very good. But, we didn't have to look too hard about what is a big item in the news today, and it's what was in the news yesterday and probably the day before. That has a little bit to do with, politics that are involved. We have to talk about our president. You can tell me who really is the president right now. And then we also have to deal with what's going on in Syria, of course. But anyway, there's a lot going on. It offers us a chance to make our points that America is better off if we mind our own business. But I wished I could say that's what it looks like. Every once in a while, I hear a message coming from the yet to be sworn in president, and he's saying the right things. We should try to stay out of wars and this sort of thing. But it's a little more complicated than that because it looks like it's getting to be very serious. And I want to just start off by quoting a sentence from Zero Hedge today, and the heading is: Trump tells Putin to agree to immediate ceasefire in Ukraine after Syria's Assad ousted. Well, that is a big issue, but it also, it invites this whole idea that, that it's almost like the inauguration has occurred and Trump is speaking for the people in a way that there is some truth to that, even though it's not technically that way. But there's a lot going on. It gives us a hint on what type of attitude will be used. And I think Trump will give a lot of orders, and I think that's what a lot of people liked about him. But the whole thing is will it ever backfire? Right now, people see it as a positive, but it also sometimes is involving some threats and say, well, if you don't do it, you better watch out. We're going to do put on some tariffs and sanctions, and that's not hidden. That's part of the policy. You do it our way or else. So in some ways, I like to hear it that Trump would like to get people to quit one war in Ukraine. But when it's the use of threats, I don't think long term that benefits us because it might upset somebody someday. And it certainly isn't going to be very pleasing for Russia to hear this. So it remains to be seen, but all we can do, Daniel, the way I see it from where we are, is to encourage non-interventionism and a willingness to talk to people and not look for another fight, because I think it said that the Russians had no business being in Syria, and they should just stay out of here and get away. I might say, and the United States, that advice for the United States might go might go on, just as good for us as for others, because we're in too many places. And that, of course, is part of our mission, is try to save a dollar here and there, because, they're spending more than a dollar here and there. And that is a big deal. And a lot of this is related to our foreign policy. But this is a messy situation and things are changing. But, the alignments are different. But right now, it looks to me like if some of these things go through and there's a so-called settlement and find out who the terrorists are and who's running Syria, I'll bet you a little bit that we'll be sending more money over there.
Indeed, Dr. Paul. I want to thank Joshua Clements, who just donated $50 on our live stream. We appreciate your support. President Trump on the campaign trail, he vowed to end this war on day one. And so I think there's a lot of pressure that he's assumed on himself to end it. And it's certainly, as you say, Dr. Paul, it's a nice aspiration. Put into practice, I do wonder whether, particularly with regard to a statement that he made, actually, if you could put that first clip on, this is the article we're talking about. He's telling President Putin, look what happened to Assad. You better pay attention because you may be next if you don't do a ceasefire. And now that may be overhyping the way he said it, but it certainly is there, the question. And if you go to the next clip, actually, here's Here's a little more of what he said. This is a post that he made on Truth Social. And he said, Assad is gone. He's fled the country. His protector, Russia, led by Putin, was not interested in protecting him any longer. There's no reason for Russia to be in there in the first place. As you point out, Dr. Paul, of course, that would raise the question, what about the 800 U.S. bases that we have around the world? If that's true for Russia, then it's certainly true for us. But he went on to say some things that, I think, first of all, I think he has good instincts. If he knows that people want him to end the war, he knows why he was elected. He promised to end wars. And all the polls we've been citing lately show how much America wants out of these wars, to stop being Ukraine's protector, as Putin was Assad's protector. The question is, some of the things that he said, I wonder and I worry, Dr. Paul, whether he's getting the right advice, where the people around him are telling him things that just aren't true. And one of the reasons that I worry about this is he cited 600,000 Russian soldiers dead or wounded. Now, that may be a number that comes from the neocons and the people who want to continue this war by saying Russia's on its back, it's about ready to drop. And this is what they've been saying since the very beginning. Russia will fold in a week. Don't worry, this will be a piece of cake, or a cakewalk, as they said about Iraq. If they're feeding him this false information, there's a danger that he will have the wrong conclusions. And it's very obvious that this is not the case. For one, why are we talking about Ukraine needing to start drafting teenagers? If they were doing so well and Russia doing so badly, wouldn't it be the other way around? So there are a lot of problems with, I think, what he's expecting. I think his expectations are too high, Dr. Paul, because if he said there must be an immediate ceasefire, well, Russia, by all accounts, is winning the conflict. I don't think even the mainstream media is saying that, Dr. Paul. And so when you are winning a conflict, when you're winning a war, you don't stop and have peace negotiations. It's unrealistic expectations. So a policy that's, I think, rooted in a very positive thing could fail by design if people that are talking to him are telling him things that aren't true. I think that's just the real danger, Dr. Paul.
Well, there was one statistic that you and I talked a little bit about, and that has to do with what is the status of the Russians? Are they weak, and have they been weakened by the Ukraine war? And they've had their problem. But just getting to the proper understanding, Trump said the coming president also said that Moscow had lost all interest in Syria, and because of Ukraine, where close to 600,000 Russian soldiers were wounded or dead. And that just doesn't sound quite right to me, but well, that's horrendous, when you're talking about that. And, I keep thinking about the famous quote and the famous policy of Ronald Reagan as peace through strength. And I think people misinterpret the word strength. The strength can be all kinds of things. I tend to think strength is willingness to defend on principle the freedoms that can bring about peace in the world. But the strength, shouting and threatening, I just don't think that is the same thing. I don't think that automatically translate into strength. What if it translates into more people questioning our policy and more people, I keep thinking in financial terms, what if that contributes to the fact that there's a few people in this world today that would like to challenge the dollar as a reserve currency? Now that's a big deal. That's strength, but it's not the kind they're talking about. The strength that they refer to is we have more weapons than you do, and we'll use them, and we do. And if we settle things, and I think between the lines, Daniel, what I read about Syria is things, if they get settled, now that we're talking about who to blame for what, it looks like we're opening up the door for more money to go in there. I don't think this is an indication, we're going to end the war in Ukraine and we don't have to send them any money, but we might be involved because we already have interest in the oil. There's oil in Syria, and there are some other countries around that area that like that idea to be on the side of who's running Syria, and that is something that we should be concerned about.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you go to the next one, which is the actual post that President-elect Trump made on Truth Social, there's another thing that's slightly disturbing, Dr. Paul, and it does again it makes you worry that he's not getting accurate advice from people around him. And hopefully, when they are confirmed or what have you, they're read into the intelligence and they'll see that some of these things are wrong. But one of the things that he said is that Russia and Iran are in a weakened state right now because of Ukraine and a bad economy. And they're the other because of Israel and its fighting success. Well, if you look at Russia's economic growth, now we know that statistics are always fudged, Dr. Paul, but if you do look at their GDP growth, their economy is less than weakened. This is sort of another neocon talking point that was made from the beginning. Remember, Ursula von der Leyen, who's the head of the European Commission, she said that they're taking computer chips out of their washing machines and using them for weapons. That's what kind of bad shape they're in. Well, that hasn't been the case. And we've seen with the Oreshnik missile that was just launched that they do have the technology to move ahead. So again, I just think it's a danger of coming in armed with false information and then having false expectations based on that information. Anyone who's winning a war doesn't sit down to negotiate with the loser. It's not how it works. When we were beating, the Allies were beating Germany in World War II. We had them at their last legs. We didn't say, okay, well, let's have a talk and figure out how we can divide this up. No, the one side capitulates when they're losing. And the other thing that he said, Dr. Paul, just quickly, is that he said that Zelensky wants to make a deal. He'd like to make a deal. Now, I hope that's the case. But from everything that we see from Zelensky, it's the opposite. He doesn't want to make a deal, or the deal that he wants to make is a deal that's unrealistic. Like, okay, you give us all of our land back, you give us a bunch of money, we punish you, and that'll be the deal. It's unrealistic. It's just, Trump should know this. He's a deal maker, and it's concerning.
Well, they've mentioned it, and it appears in the news, and it appeared in this article. But I don't think to the significance of how are they going to solve it. I'm talking about the Russian bases in Syria. I just can't visualize it. Well, we're talking about it and we'll do this. And the radicals aren't so radical as they used to be, and they are taking over and we're going to work this out. But I don't think the Russians are, well, just give us a week or two. We'll pack our bags and we're going to leave because we really don't need those bases anymore. I can't see that happening. And I don't know what the plan is for that. We can shout and tell them what to do and to get along, but that's not going to be automatic. There are some things that won't change just with the people, intimidating them to follow the policy that we want. And Trump does speak out that some of it, it stirs us up because we're worried whether it's a little bit too aggressive. But then he comes up and he says, the United States should not intervene in the Syrian conflict. Well, that is a good idea. And they say, we don't have troops here. We're not going to put troops in. But I've heard that so many times. But, the first day that this broke, when Assad had to go, I said, there's CIA agents involved. I just bet they're involved in doing this. I'll bet we have special forces there. And we are involved. And it looks to me like they're opening the door that, we're not going to be able to, the people in the country, our country, America, they're turning against us, taking their money and sending it to the Ukraine war, which is such a disaster. But maybe they won't catch it because we'll start sending the money into Syria and to maybe secure the oil and help come up with a solution. What are we going to do with the Russians? They have bases in this country. How are we going to bring about peace and order?
Yeah. I do want to thank Doubting Thomas, who just donated $50 to the program, saying end all foreign aid, including Israel, and Daniel Hamel, who put in $20 to help us. We appreciate that. Well, let's move on to our second topic, Dr. Paul, and it's another one that's really right in the news and very relevant. And if you can put on that next clip, this is now all of a sudden that the HTS has taken over Syria, the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, formerly known as Al-Qaeda. The U.S. is now considering removing them from the terror list. And I think this says a lot, Dr. Paul, to the politicization of the terrorist list. One day you're a terrorist. The next day, you're an aid recipient. That's at least what it sounds like to me. I don't know. What's your take on this?
Well, what fascinated me was there's a reward involved here.
Yeah.
How much? $10 million Bonnie on the head of getting rid of Giuliani. So somebody, I don't know, what are they going to do if they get rid of him? Who's going to get the money? So they either have to keep doing it or change their plan. But I don't know, because that's probably peanuts compared to if we get to investing in a lot more money than we have so far. But I guess the several decades that I've looked at this, I get rather cynical. And there was a time in my life where people would write stories about being maneuvered, how Roosevelt maneuvered and manipulated us into World War II. And for years I said, nobody could do that. Nobody could do it. Well, I've softened that position because I think some people do, and they rationalize. They say, well, it's better to get this war over and get it done with. That's the only way we can do it. And that's the only way we can bring the people together. So, and that's been going on, ever since, whether it's, I became much more aware. I was aware of World War II, but much more aware when we were fighting Korea and some of my teachers were being drafted. Vietnam was another disaster and I get drafted, on and on. We're always involved. But now it's different. We hide our involvement. We have drones. We can deal with those, and we don't have to have tanks and all. But we still are much involved. We are still very much involved, and we should deal with it. And I think most people involved will say the right words because some of our presidential candidates are pretty good at talking about non-intervention foreign policy, and it helps them to get elected. So I think what I'm talking about is we're searching for the truth. Hopefully we are able to contribute to that because so much of the politics and foreign policy is based on lies.
Yeah, including these apparently these terror watch lists, because you can easily be taken off if you have a political success that pleases Washington, D.C. I think it sort of undermines the idea of what terrorism is, and you could say that's naive to question it, but I think that's the case. So if you go to that next clip, who is Giuliani? As you just mentioned, he is the founder of the Al-Nusra Front, which was the Al-Qaeda affiliate in Syria. We all remember Al-Qaeda. So remember, we talked about at the time, the first whitewashing was when they changed their name to Nusra Front. Doesn't sound as bad as Al-Qaeda to the American people. Well, that was kind of sullied, and so they renamed it to HTS. So that's where they are now. If you go to the next one, this is an important piece from the article, which we found on antiwar.com, which is another makeover. Giuliani is now portraying himself as a moderate. And President Biden has said he likes what he's hearing from the former Al-Qaeda leader. We've taken notes of sentiments by leaders of this revolution in recent days, and they're saying the right things right now. That seems to me, Dr. Paul, incredibly naive. One wonders how many DC PR firms are going over to Giuliani and, fixing his hair, fixing his beard, and telling him the stuff to say. Remember, he said a few days ago, we want to be more inclusive. Maybe they're going to start a DIE program in Syria. Who knows? But it does feel like this is a PR airbrushing over the history of some fairly brutal people.
Dave DeCamp wrote this article in Anti-War, and we watch carefully what Dave has to say. And in this article, he's quoting he says the Washington Post reported that U.S. officials are in contact with HTS and other groups involved in the offensive. One U.S. official said the Biden administration was doing a real-time assessment. Oh, good, be reassured, on whether or not HTS should be removed from the list of foreign terrorist organizations. This is a big deal. This deserves a debate. My reaction was, there should be no debate whatsoever. We should just say no to this nonsense and don't even tell, oh, should we give them money? Should we go over there? What is our next move? What are we going to do with the oil? What are we going to do with the Russians? How are we going to handle Israel so they don't overreact? All these things. It'd be so much nicer. So, Daniel, I think we cheat a little bit because we have a foreign policy that is so delightful, and it is true promotion of peace and prosperity, and it is something that it's easy to figure out. If you defend America and the taxpayer, and you say you shouldn't have any aggressive wars, and you don't have entangling alliances, it makes it pretty easy, especially when we have the satisfaction that we truly believe that will bring us peace better than any other type of foreign policy.
And, the reason they want to remove them from the terror list isn't because they've all of a sudden cleaned up and are behaving themselves. It's that while they are on the terror list, we can't send them money. So that's what it's all about. They want to be able to send millions and millions and tens of millions of dollars to the new rulers of Syria, but they can't do it because of this little technical problem. Now, the same is true if you go to the next clip. This is back in 2016 when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, and she spearheaded this idea of removing the MEK in Iran from the terror list. She didn't do it because they cleaned up their act. She did it because the U.S. wanted to work with the MEK to help overthrow the Iranian government. So again, it's all about politics, and it's all about the opposite of what you say, Dr. Paul, which is a non-interventionist foreign policy. The U.S. wants to intervene more, so it politicizes the terror watch list so that it can do so. So all of this is a very bad sign, I think.
At the beginning, I mentioned the various wars that I remember so clearly, but they were very similar in that you thought about airplanes and aircraft carriers, and you thought about tanks and all these things, and it's old-fashioned. Now the intervention is a little more sophisticated. The lying is a little bit more sophisticated. It's harder for the American people to keep up. But I'm impressed, though, the American people, especially right now, there's some vehicles where we can reach out to supporters of this position through the internet, and that to me is wonderful. And I think I think the old-fashioned Twitter, and which is now X, it looks like it is something that's being offered to getting the truth out. And somebody will say, well, I read this or that, but compared to what we've had to put up, compared to the nonsense of the big wars in the 20th century and all that stuff, there was really not much of a discussion. And I think it's this age that we live in, because I give a lot of credit to the internet and other vehicles, even in spite of all their shortcomings, that awakened a lot of people who finally got sick and tired of listening to that nonsense about COVID. And it's that debate's still going on. It's going on with some of the, people being appointed to the new administration. But I think that vehicle is there. And of course, we work hard to use that in a very positive manner.
Absolutely. I'm going to close out, Dr. Paul, and I want to just put up one clip, and our friend and colleague Norman sent this over to me this morning. But if you can put that next clip on, this is really something. You may have to expand that a little bit, but this is a post on Twitter X put out by Joe Wilson, who's a Republican for South Carolina. And you will remember him, Dr. Paul, because he gave floor speeches after 9/11 every single day. And he ended every speech with, "We will never forget 9/11. Well, here he is in his office celebrating the people who took over Syria. The people who took over Syria are Al-Qaeda, the very people that he was condemning every day on the floor after 9/11. So this really goes to show, Dr. Paul, I would say this is Exhibit A. Unfortunately, I don't want to pick on the guy, but a lot of members of Congress aren't all that smart, and they listen to what people tell them around them rather than doing their own research, unlike others. So that's a kind of a funny little aside, but I will, if you put that last clip on, I will remind our viewers that we are at the year-end fundraising state at the Ron Paul Institute. We're almost a third of the way to our $100,000 matching funds goal. We need this money to continue bringing you the Liberty Report and all of the things that the Ron Paul Institute does. If you like what we do, please make your donation. I will add a link into the description here where you can help us. We're racing to the end of the year and racing to take advantage of those matching funds. And we appreciate everything that everyone has donated to the Ron Paul Institute. Over to you, Dr. Paul.
Very good. And I applaud, Daniel, your efforts to keep us alive and keep us moving and keeping our program on the air. Because, when we started this, when I left Congress, we had some donations that set us up and we got us our equipment. That equipment is right now wearing out, and that's why we're broadcasting in a little different manner. But it needs to be done, and sometimes it is easy to motivate people to say, hey, they need some help. But we do, and I also get annoyed when people have to beg and plead. But I always think that, well, maybe our message and our operation isn't effective enough, because I want people to want to send us money. So, and they have over the years. I marvel at how much money has been sent to the various campaigns I've had. So I want to make sure people know how grateful I am. But right now, we've concentrated some other things rather than letting people know that right now we need to redo some of our equipment to keep this program on. But I do want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.